You're listening to Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives. I'm Celeste Frazier, your host, and today we're going to be talking about Two Colors, One Rainbow. And my guest is international spiritual teacher Kat Kim. She's the founder of the School of Divine Confidence. It's an online program that gives spiritual training and confidence coaching to non-conformist spiritual seekers. So you know this is going to be a good show. Stay tuned. Hey, Mystic Magic fans. It's Reverend Celeste with Mystic Magic. And we are going to have an exciting time today because we have an exciting guest. Her name is Kat Kim. And we are going to be discussing two colors, one country, and all kinds of other fun things. So Kat Kim is an amazing person. I want to tell you a little bit about her. She's an international spiritual teacher, a workshop leader, and she's the founder of the School of Divine Confidence. That's an online program that offers spiritual training and confidence coaching to non-conformist spiritual leaders. And that's for people who are ready to come out of hiding and reclaim their confidence and personal power. As a former crack addict and convicted drug offender facing 3 years in state prison, Kat battled addiction, abuse, and depression to come out on the other side. Her inspiring transformation and work with real people worldwide has landed her on set with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as a contributing coach and mentor on his motivational reality TV show called Wake Up Call. And that aired nationally on TNT. She was also a 2014 finalist in the New York Television Festival's Lifetime Unscripted Development pipeline to be chosen for a reality show following her life as a successful Seattle entrepreneur. Today, Kat continues to impact thousands of people by using her bold and unconventional presence and powerfully inspiring stories to help people build unshakable confidence in knowing who they are and what they're here to do. Welcome, Kat.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I've been really excited to have this time with you, Celeste.
Oh, me too. I caught wind of you in Colorado, in Denver, and I was like, wow, who is that? Like, finally, a breath of fresh air. And so I was just really grateful that you were a speaker at the Centers for Spiritual Living conference at Mile High that night. And you are an international spiritual teacher. So what do you teach, and where do people experience you in person and online?
Well, I can be international because all of my work is virtual. It's online. I do travel around to speak in different locations, but mostly people find me online. You know, I share my message, and I think it resonates with people across the world. So the right people always show up. And you know, I always thought that I would be working with women primarily, but I get people from all walks of life, from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. I think there's a message. I think there's a message that both you and I are sharing that resonates with people all over the world. And that's what's really exciting to me at this time, and with what we are doing with our teachings.
So tell me, Kat, what is this School of Divine Confidence, and how did you start that? What's the story there?
Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning, because there's a whole purpose and a reason for why I started the School of Divine Confidence. Can I start from the beginning?
Oh, please.
Okay, so when I was 6 years old, my mother began feeding me diet pills, and I was just barely tall enough to look over the kitchen countertop, and every single morning she would be at the cutting board, and I would stand next to her, and she would be cutting something on the cutting board. And I looked up at her one day and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, these are diet pills and these are for adults. And you're just a child, so you only need to eat half of them. So I just accepted that. I didn't question it. I just accepted, okay, well, these are, diet pills. I need them because I'm fat. So every morning I would start taking those. And, needless to say, this was kind of like the beginning of a lifelong struggle of low self-image, no self-worth, really horrible body image.
You look great now.
Yeah, thanks. And there's a story, so I'll get there. But I thought I was ugly, I thought I was fat, and I thought I was unwanted, all by the time I was in second grade. And I also grew up in a very emotionally and physically abusive environment. So I started rebelling quite young. And I started smoking and drinking when I was 13. I was doing hardcore drugs by the time I was 16. And by the time I was 18, I was dealing cocaine. And I was transporting it from Washington State to California, to Oakland, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah. And one fateful day, I was caught, I was handcuffed, I was put behind bars. And suddenly I was facing up to 3 years in state prison.
Did you serve time?
No. So what happened was that, first of all, you'd think that was my wake-up call, but it wasn't. Even while I was in jail, I was trying to make drug deals. So I served time in jail, but they offered me, because I pleaded guilty, I had the option of doing weekly drug tests. I had to go to Narcotics Anonymous. I had to do drug rehab for, I think, 1.5 to 2 years. So that was in place. Instead of going to prison, this was the route that I took. Instead of, fighting the court system, I said, okay, I'm guilty and I'm going to do this. So luckily I was able to get out of jail. I recovered from drug abuse, but as you know, Celeste, when something's deep within our consciousness, it doesn't just go away. So what happened to me is, even though I cleaned up drugs and alcohol, I continued to hate myself. I continued to devalue myself. And this entire time I walked around like I was one nasty, mean bitch. I mean, I was so mean, and I didn't take care of myself. I was really, really, I didn't feel good in my body. I was overweight, and I was in an abusive relationship with a man who just took all the life and energy out of me. And it wasn't until one day I was walking down my apartment hallway to the elevator door, and across from the elevator door there's this big mirror that was on the wall, and I'm walking towards the elevator, I'm walking towards the mirror, and I see someone in the reflection. There was a woman standing there, and she looked really, really depressed. She was wearing big frumpy clothes. Her hair was unkept, and more than how she looked, it was this dark energy that was coming from her. And even in that moment, when I was just wallowing in my own toxicity and this depression, it was a really difficult time for me at that time. In that moment, I saw her and I thought, oh my God, at least I'm not that bad, And then it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was looking at myself in the mirror. There was nobody else in the hallway. It was just me. I had become so disconnected with the woman that I wanted to be versus the woman that I was being in that moment that I didn't even recognize myself when I saw myself in the mirror. Yeah. And not to sound overly dramatic, but it was like literally this scene where I walked into the elevator door, and as the elevator door is closing, I could still see myself in that mirror across the hallway, right? I could see myself. And that was the moment, as the elevator door was closing, I said, this is my moment. I am going to do whatever it takes to become the woman that I want to be. And that was the moment I said that this is the last time. This is the last time I'm going to be this person that doesn't treat herself well, that doesn't care about herself, you know? So that was that moment. And that was the moment I decided I would do whatever it takes to become the woman that I wanted to be. I wanted to be powerful. I wanted to be beautiful. I wanted to walk into a room and have people notice me, not for how I looked, but for who I was, for my presence. You know, I wanted to make an impact and transform lives. And so I began studying everything under the sun, Celeste, about personal transformation. And I became a certified image consultant. So this is where I began studying personal style and people's body shapes and their natural coloring. And, you know, I began to understand how to, you know, dress myself and put on makeup in a way that enhances my personal beauty, right? And I learned how to do this for other women. So I began what I began to do is like help women uncover the essence of who they are, so that we can translate it and align that with how they're showing up in the world. And then I went even deeper. I wanted to understand what your body goes through to undergo transformation. So I studied, I became a nationally certified personal trainer. I studied biology, nutrition, weight loss, and I lost a bunch of weight. And then I wanted to go deeper. So I became a mindset coach, transformational life coach, where I began studying the mindset and how our thoughts really impact our results.
Yes.
And this quest for transformation on the outside, it kept taking me deeper and deeper inside into the world of spirituality, where I began studying, you know, quantum physics and metaphysics. And it ironically, you know, kept me going deeper and deeper. And then I discovered, you know, spirit and all of that. And I was like, oh, this is where transformation happens. It's not about the outside. It's about our relationship with spirit on the inside, and how we are thinking, what's in our consciousness.
Yes. And
that's what has, it really just took me into a different world that I did not expect or even want, really. And that's where I discovered that this thing called divine confidence is not about what we acquire on the outside. Divine confidence is having a powerful knowing, a powerful faith in knowing who you are and what you're here to do in this moment, regardless of what's going on the outside. So I dedicated my life and my career to helping others go through similar transformations. And that was where the School of Divine Confidence was born.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, I have heard you speak, and you are a powerful speaker. And I've also noticed a boldness in your talk, and that speaks to your personal power. And I noticed that you also have a workshop called Moving from Shame to Self-Confidence. And so it's wonderful that you've taken your journey and out of your gratitude extended that to other people.
Yeah.
I also noticed that on your website, you speak to spiritual non-conformists.
Yeah.
Now, who do you consider to be spiritual non-conformists, and what's your message to us?
Well, a spiritual nonconformist is 100% inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He says that we have a mandate to be nonconformists. Yes. And this is in opposition to what I noticed, and I talked about this in, you know, at the convention, Celeste, right? About consumer spirituality.
Yeah.
Which is what I discovered to be the mainstream pop culture spirituality of today, that really essentially trains us to be better consumers, right? And inadvertently perpetuates blind conformity to the dominating and oppressive structures of consumer capitalism.
Sure.
And I realized that not only was I practicing consumer spirituality, but I was preaching that, you know? I was part of all of that. I was part of that whole thing about, oh, you can manifest whatever you want. Just think big. You can have the big house, the car, you can have all the money that you want. And there was no mention of social issues. I didn't even you know, I didn't have to worry about social issues. I didn't have to worry about that because I live in, you know, even as an Asian American, I still have privilege in this country.
Yes.
And so my privilege was that I didn't have to look at those issues. And yet I still called myself spiritual. That's what I define as consumer spirituality.
Interesting disconnect, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I feel that on this journey of being called into spirituality, I had to come across that, and it was really difficult, Celeste. It was like it was a blow to everything that I thought I knew about myself and my dreams and spirituality. You know, everything I had learned, everything I had spent all these years learning. You know, when I finally discovered this, I was like, wait a second, this is wrong. There's something missing here. And so I began studying people like Michael Fox, Matthew Fox, excuse me, and then
I was going to say, you studying an actor, or
yeah. And you know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
And you know, this is where, you know, I really realized reading and listening to Dr. Martin Luther King's sermons and, you know, his books and his autobiographies, they're absolutely 100% different from what I've been reading about spirituality. And I was like, I've been missing the boat here on something. So I delved into it, and non-conformist spirituality is a person who questions, you know, deeply the systems that perpetuate oppression, racism, you know, all of those isms in the world. Someone who refuses to conform to the way that we are all being told and conditioned that we should be living, which right now in this consumer capitalist world, the way that we are conditioned to live is to consume as much as we can, yes. Consume as much as we want, and that is normal behavior, and that there are enough resources for us to do that. But that is not true. It is absolutely not true. Yeah. And so the other big thing is that, you know, that's also really hard to come across too, because, you know, everywhere we look, the consumer culture tells us we need to purchase this, we need to buy that in order to be okay. And, you know, what we know from our spiritual teachings and our spiritual practice is that that these things do not define us, right? And that God is our source, Spirit is our source. Right. And so, you know, this, you know, everything I teach in the School of Divine Confidence and everything I talk about here is really about what all of us teachers are talking about is this inward journey. It's an inward journey of letting go of our attachments to the outer world, letting go of our preconceived notions of what success and love look like, and really going inwards into that and cultivating that relationship with Spirit. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. You reminded me when you said inward journey of Howard Thurman, who was actually Martin Luther King's spiritual teacher.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So how has your study informed your approach? Like, how do you take people from their brainwashing, for lack of a better word, or their socializations into the Hermetic philosophies, the New Thought teachings, the Buddhist teachings, the Christ consciousness, Dr. King's awareness, and Noam Chomsky's consciousness? How do you get them to move from, you know, this kind of Anglo-centric to a broader and deeper awakening?
First of all, I speak only to those people who know deep in their bones that they're being called to do something important. And those people know it. They feel it. Yes. It's an aching in their soul. Their soul is crying for something, screaming for something more. Those are the people I speak to, and those are the people that I only speak to. And when I speak to them, they are the ones who feel it in their body, who feel it in their bones, but they feel stuck. There's something that's holding them back. And they know it. When I'm speaking these words, like they say, oh, that's me. And then when we talk, it's just in what I teach in the School of Divine Confidence. I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King said He says, if life is to be complete, it must be three-dimensional. It must be complete on all sides. And he called these three areas, he called them dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
And he called them the length, and then the breadth, and the height of life. I call them your three pillars of divine confidence. So I help people find their divine confidence in these three pillars. And the first pillar, I call it the pillar of self-actualization, but Dr. Martin Luther King called it the length of life. So who are you meant, what are you meant to do outside of society, outside of even your family? Each and every one of us are individualized. Each and every one of us are being called to do something that is very specific and very unique to us. And most people don't know what that is because they're too busy trying to be what the world is telling them to be, right? So Dr. Martin Luther King says, this is the length of life, and that everyone should have a healthy self-interest, a healthy self-interest. And this area is where we figure out, what is that for you? What is that? Like, what are you as an individual, unique person here to do? Okay, that's the first pillar. The second pillar, Dr. Martin Luther King calls it the breadth of life. I call this pillar the pillar of social responsibility.
Good.
Right? Like, okay, the first pillar was about you as an individual, but now let's talk about you as part of the collective, you as one with everybody, not just your friends and family, but your neighbors, your community, our country, and the world, and all of humanity.
Like we say, everybody.
Everybody. Exactly. What are you being called to do? What is your divine contribution in this pillar? What is that? And people don't know what that is, you know, because of the consumer culture where we have been trained to be hyper individualized. It's all about me, 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 me. And if there's something going on in the world and society and it doesn't affect me, then I don't really need to do anything about it, right? But that's not the truth. That's not what we're here to do. We are here to be part of the collective. Yeah. So that's pillar 2. And pillar 3, Dr. Martin Luther King calls the height of life, which he says is your upward reach towards God and spirit. And I call it the pillar of relationship to spirit. What is your relationship to spirit? What is your relationship to God? Are you nurturing this? Do you know God intimately? Do you know God like you know your partner or your child? You know, when your partner or your child makes a face, you know exactly what they're thinking. They don't even have to talk. You know what they're thinking. Are you that close and are you that intimate with God? Are you spending time with spirit? Do you have that bond and that relationship? Or are you afraid of God? You know, and if you're afraid of God, that's okay. But this pillar is about getting to know spirit, you know?
And what your relationship is.
Yes, what is that relationship and how do you want to define that relationship for yourself? So these 3 pillars are the 3 pillars of divine confidence. And I say that none of them are optional. None of them are optional.
Required.
They're required. They are absolutely required, and divine confidence lies at the intersection of all 3 of these pillars.
Yes.
So this is kind of the framework for what I teach my students in the School of Divine Confidence, and what I return to every single time I forget, Celeste. I come back to these 3 pillars, and I get clear about, okay, what is my personal purpose here? What is my purpose as a social responsibility, and what is my purpose with God? I come back to this every single time, and it always grounds me.
And our responsibility to God is what we do in terms of social justice. It is us as the arms of God, as the legs of God, as the face of God, right? The heart of God.
100%.
So yeah. I saw you on social media talking about the bias between Blacks and Asians. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I know the Black perspective. Can you share your experience? I know you weren't born in North Korea, but you are North Korean. And
South Korea.
Oh, South Korea. Sorry.
Yeah. And I was born in South Korea. Yeah.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause we were talking about your dad, and I thought maybe you learned about it after you got here. Okay. So what is your experience in terms of bias
Yeah.
from Asians towards Blacks in your family, in your community, and what do you do to address that?
Yeah, sure. So anti-Blackness definitely exists within communities of color. Um, I am Asian American. I, my parents are first generation. I was born in Korea. And all my years growing up, I was taught to strive to be like our white neighbors, or white family, have the education like a white person does, talk like them, dress like them, be like them, look like them. And it, definitely was not to be like a Black family or a Black person.
Right.
And it was even not to be like our fellow Asians. That's the
Mhm.
interesting part. Like it was just, I was just taught that we don't want to be like, we don't want to be a minority. We want to be as white as possible. And anytime there was any conversation or something going on with Black people, my mother or my father would just say, you don't want to do that, or you don't want to be like that. And I just, I grew up, um, just accepting that. I didn't think it was like, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't fight with them around it. I just rolled my eyes. But what I didn't
Questioned
realize,
it internally?
yeah, I questioned them internally, but what I didn't real and I knew it was wrong, but what I didn't realize is that even though I knew it was wrong, it was still, my consciousness was still accepting that as truth.
Because that was a great influence.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I began noticing myself just like, oh, I don't want to be like a Black person. It wasn't something that I thought of. It was just something that was. That's the danger of it. It
Mhm.
wasn't even something I'm being racist right now. It wasn't a conscious conversation that I was having in my
It's
head.
insidious.
It was internalized. It was absolutely internalized.
Mhm.
And as I'm going deeper onto this spiritual journey, I see those things now that were the internalized racism that lives within me. And I'm doing my work. I know I'm doing my work. But what does that mean? I can't just do my work and keep this work inside of me. I have to make an impact within my Asian community as well. So I'm having these conversations with my family, for one. Whenever they say something, I stop them. And the great thing is, like, they get it now. Like, they get that they can't say that in front of me, at least.
Okay.
Are they healed of racism? I don't think so. But at least they know, that's not a proper conversation that you can have around cat.
Well, you were sharing one conversation that you had with your mother
Mhm.
where you said, you know how you feel this, and you were comparing it
Yeah.
to the Black experience.
Yes. Yeah. She
And
had a she had an aha moment, because we were talking about white privilege, and that word, right? As you know, even white people in America have a hard time understanding what white privilege is
right,
when
right.
you explain it in English.
Hmm.
So to translate that to a Korean woman, who doesn't understand English, was a little bit challenging. But the way I described it to her was, Mom, you know how you know that because you don't speak English, because you are a Korean woman, you don't know how society works, you don't know how to communicate, that you have a disadvantage. And that when you look at a white woman, isn't it just easier for her? Don't you think it's just easier for her to do anything in life, make money, get around? And she's like, of course it's easier for her. And she just knows that that's her lived experience as well as an Asian woman. She has even she has experienced racism as an Asian woman, right?
Hmm.
So she said, yeah, I understand that. When I said, well, that's exactly how it is with Black people. Like, just because of the color of their skin, they they are disadvantaged in many ways. and white folks and even Asian people have more advantages than they do. And she just really, she got it. And it was a beautiful moment where I could see the expression change in her face. So
That's
I know,
beautiful.
I know we have a long road ahead of us. And at the same time, I do see moments and little changes here and there. And I think that's what I live for, Celeste. It's like those little moments, you know.
Yeah, it is something to celebrate, and it
Absolutely.
does keep you going in those moments of despair when it seems as it's never going to happen and it's an impossible goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like on a community level, have you reached a broader number of people? Because we have these biases about each other, like well, Asian people can't drive, or they're really smart in math, or we have these stereotypes.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, they probably have the same kind of stereotypes that white people have about Black people. Like,
Mm.
how do you address them in terms of perceptions?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things like I'm working on right now is when I talk about these issues, um, is translating it to Korean, which was a really interesting project in itself because Koreans in Korea don't know the differences in like they don't know there's Black and there's Mexican there, because Korean is a homogenous culture. So pretty much everyone who doesn't look like Korean is just the other race. So they don't typically understand or see the nuances. So one of the things I'm doing is trying to translate what we're talking here into Korean, and helping them to understand that we as Asians, we cannot just stand by and watch this happen in our country and around the world, because for the obvious reasons, because it's not right. Secondly, because also Asians now are being targeted,
Yes.
because of COVID. And
Well, because of how the president is framing it, and
exactly.
with his casual blame and crazy
Mhm.
play on words, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And I've never felt this, Celeste, until the pandemic hit. I've never had to feel fear for going out into the world and walking around. And I don't necessarily feel that for myself because where I live, it's safe. But I had that fear come up with my mother. I've
Mm.
had that fear. When she goes to the grocery store, what if someone attacks her? And I felt that for the first time, and I connected that to how Black people feel
Yes,
all the time,
it's
especially
real.
Black men, just driving down the street or walking down the street or jogging down the street, right?
Yes,
And so,
us too.
right, yeah, yes,
And sometimes you might even want to look a little cuter, not just to be looking cute, but just so that you're not mistaken for a male.
right. Yeah. Well, that made me really see like, oh, this is not just the problem for dark-skinned people, for Blacks or browns. This is a problem for all of us. And that's something I really want to communicate, and I want Asian people to understand too. This is not just the fight for Black and brown people. This is our fight. It must be our fight.
When you were talking about Koreans being homogenous, I couldn't help but think about the struggles between North Korea and South Korea.
Mm.
And then, when we were talking earlier about, Japan's colonialism on Korea, and, how does the separations in the midst of Asian communities show
Yeah.
up? Does it show up as conflict, bias, violence?
Good question. It shows up as classism. So we have racism here, right? Because we have all these different skin colors. It's, we can see that within each other in America. But
Right.
because that doesn't really exist in Korea, though I have to say racism exists within Asian cultures. First of all, there's a tier of supposedly East Asian cultures are better than Southeast Asian cultures. Again, though, skin color. So Southeast Asians, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, even Indians with darker skin colors, you will find that East Asians will have racist tendencies towards Southeast Asians. And it's also, again, based on skin color, which is, it's like a universal thing, but primarily.
How do they act on it, or what do they do that makes it obvious?
Well, the same thing as over here. I think, in Korea particularly, I won't speak for Japan, but in Korea, you have a lot of Southeast Asians working in Korea, doing, construction type jobs, things like that, like Filipinos or Vietnamese people. And, they'll be looked down upon, certainly. Yeah. And so racism that, exists within communities of color, as we all know, and also in Korea, it's classism is a really big thing. Class, like what class, how much money you have, and what's your education, and it's very severe. If you don't have money, if you don't have education, you will be looked down upon as well.
Yeah, we were talking the other day about the feudalism that exists today, and that racism is part of that. So I think, there's more of that for us to explore because of racism being based in economics, and every separation being about having more than the other, and making sure that you're not on the bottom.
Exactly.
Because anybody who's been a colonizer has a mindset that I don't want to be on the bottom, and if I don't oppress these people, I will be on the bottom and they will be on the top. So I have to keep oppressing so that I'm not on the bottom. And it's a fear-based, not a love-based way of seeing life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that you are on the side of love. And that,
oh, thank you.
what you're promoting is, self-love for people, and, and to take it into, the beloved community on a global basis. So it's important work. I want you to let us know what upcoming projects that you'd like our international listeners to know about in the coming weeks.
Yeah, sure. I am hosting a live 5-day free masterclass. It's called the Divine Confidence Masterclass. It touches on everything we talked about here today around the 3 pillars. And I'm going to help you get clear on what those 3 pillars mean for you, so that you can get really clear, find clarity on what you're being called to do. And it's 5 days because, it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of time. Right. So I will be hosting that, and I will be hosting those completely free. And, I will be hosting them regularly. So you can find me at the Confident Leadership Community. It's a Facebook group. So if you just type in the Confident Leadership Community, you will find me there, and I will be sharing more information about that.
This is rich stuff. People get it for free?
Yeah, they get it for free. Yeah, they get it for free.
Life transforming, and they get it for free?
They get it for free. Yes. They get it for free.
Wow.
It'll be like 5 to 10. It'll be like 5 days. It's all free. Absolutely. Yeah. And, of course, if you want to take it deeper with me, there's an option to be part of the School of Divine Confidence, which I would love. But my focus and my purpose is to provide as much value and as much transformation, even just in that 5 days, all for free.
All right. How generous of you. Well, I'm so grateful that you have said yes to love, that you are really living on purpose and transforming lives. Thank you so much for being here. I see you. I know who you are. I thank God for you.
Thank you so much. Likewise, Celeste. Thank
you so much. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives.
African or Asian, but not Caucasian. Either persuasion receives a dissuasion, and joy starts to dissipate when denied to participate in life's rewards and joys, turned away by the good old boys. Races are called colors, but they're really more like hues. You won't see people's skins in oranges or blues. When one has a different shade, some distinctions tend to be made. What's an appearance but an interference from seeing a soul as perfect and whole? Are you lazy and a bad guy? Are you crazy from a bad high? Just because you're black or brown, can your life be turned around by someone who judges you not by your character but by your hue? When you were created by Most High, your spirit was perfect and fly. And that will always be true, both for me and for you. Because what does the Creator see but a perfect you and a perfect me? Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Celeste A. Frazier, and this is Mystic Magic. We'll be back next week when the topic will be high vibrations, and my guest will be Grammy Award winner, singer, songwriter, voice teacher, choir director, and climate change agent, Darlene Coldenhoven. We're on Heart, Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, and many more great venues. If this program has been helpful for you, consider supporting the show. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives.